In this time of alleged disagreement between Obama and the U.S. military brass, do Obama and the military leadership differ in any significant way on the broader question of what motivates them to support the use of U.S. military power? A recent article by Gareth Porter claims that mere hours into his presidency, Obama was visited by a contingent of military leaders. The Real News spoke to Gareth Porter about his findings.
I think that there's a degree of similarity in the views of the military leadership and the civilian advisors in the national security community, broadly speaking. And I think that it converges. I mean, the military and the civilian national security people all converge around the proposition that the United States must remain the dominant power in the world as well as in the Middle East, specifically. So their vision is always that, whether we have to get out of Iraq in 16 months or in 3 years, nevertheless, the key point is that we must maintain our military presence there. So I think that there is fundamentally a degree of consensus on fundamental propositions around that.
Gareth, you mentioned in part one of our interview that retired General Jack Keane is a key figure in this battle over U.S. policy in the Middle East. What do people need to know about Jack Keane?
Well, I mean, I think that Jack Keane is somebody who people who want to understand what's happening in the Middle East really should become familiar with. Because in a way, he's sort of the mafia don of this network of retired and active duty generals who are now quietly at work trying to figure out how they can really turn this storyline over the next few weeks against Obama, making sure that anybody in the Pentagon who meets with a reporter is going to give the same line that, he's threatening stability in Iraq and this is not acceptable and he needs to change his policy.
So what motivates Keane to push for the continued occupation of Iraq? Upon leaving the Army in 2003, he founded Keane Advisors, a financial consulting firm that specializes in servicing military contractors. The company's website claims that their extensive network within financial institutions and government agencies makes us ideal for this service. Keane also sits on the board of directors of General Dynamics, the world's 5th largest military contractor. General Dynamics released their 4th quarter financial report just last week.
The General Dynamics Corporation had yet another strong quarter, completing an outstanding year from an operating point of view. Sales in the quarter were $7.9 billion, a 4.5% growth rate over what was, you might remember, a very powerful fourth quarter in 2007. Net earnings from continuing operations were $630 million, an increase of 9% over that same fourth quarter in 2007. Order intake has been strong all year and was particularly strong during the fourth quarter. In fact, the order intake this quarter, which totaled $22.2 billion, is the largest during my tenure at General Dynamics.
Over this same retirement period that Keane has joined the private military contracting world, his advice continues to be sought by the Pentagon on a regular basis. He was even credited as the mastermind of Bush's 2007 troop surge in Iraq. Keane is a textbook example of the military-industrial complex in action.
Jack Keane is somebody who was Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, 1999 to 2003, and since then he has sort of kept in touch with this network of generals. He's the one who pushed Petraeus as the person to become the senior commander in Iraq in 2006, when the rest of the senior officers in the Army were against the surge. And this is something that we easily forget, that Petraeus was pushed in there and was ready to support this policy when everybody else who understood that this was a disaster in the Army was against it. And then in 2007, 2008, as I say, it was Keane who was really protecting Petraeus and making sure that the White House would not begin to pull troops back. So Keane is the one who, more than anybody else, is pushing this line and sort of coordinating the whole campaign.
That campaign for continued occupation requires the defense of recent U.S. history in Iraq, a position that Keane took up in a debate in October when he defended the position that the U.S. is winning the war in Iraq.
And I also know what the word winning or success looks like in Iraq. It's been a stunning achievement in Iraq, somewhat unprecedented in the history of counterinsurgency warfare, for such a dramatic turnaround in such a short period of time. The natural rhythm of life is returning to the people of Iraq. Iraq is all about its people, in my judgment, so that is why we spent so much time understanding what happened to them and what is now happening to them.
The problem that I see with the policy of the Bush administration, all the people left over, including Robert Gates, Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Admiral Mullen, the other military leaders, Petraeus, Odierno, all those people really ignore the fundamental reality that the vast majority of Iraqis want the American troops out of there. And they simply, close their eyes or turn their head and ignore it because it doesn't fit into their narrative, it doesn't fit with their interests. And if you ask the followers of Petraeus, as I have, well, what about this fact? They basically just don't know how to deal with it. I mean, they simply sort of cough and change the subject, and that's all they can do.
And what about Obama?
Well, I think that Obama has never really been asked that question. I mean, the problem partly is that the news media have also coughed and turned their head on the question of the viewpoint of the Iraqi people. That is to say, the news media covering this issue in Washington, people covering the State Department, the Pentagon, and the White House. I mean, they all sort of have gone along with the narrative that says Obama is really sort of a new hand here. He doesn't really understand the realities. And when he comes into office with a plan for a 16-month withdrawal, he simply has to be tutored by the real experts, meaning Petraeus and Gates. And once he hears them out, he will, of course, adjust his policy to the realities, and he will pull back then and reach an accommodation with the adults who are running national security policy.
Donate today and receive a new documentary film available to members of the Real News Network. The History of the National Security State with legendary author Gore Vidal. Bonus features of the DVD include an in-depth response to Vidal from ex-CIA analyst Ray McGovern, who served under 7 U.S. presidents, an exclusive interview with Colin Powell's former Chief of Staff Larry Wilkerson, and an insightful interview with oil policy analyst Antonia Juhas.
The news magazine of the screen. Living glimpses of history in the making.
Hollywood and Washington is a symbiotic relationship. They both deal with illusions. Reality doesn't often play much of a part. I think I saw through the myth of the Cold War almost from the beginning. I was a Washington political kid from a political family. Roosevelt first had radio because he had this great speaking voice and everyone liked to hear. Truman proceeded to break every arrangement that Roosevelt had set up for a peaceful coexistence. And Truman thought that it would be a good idea. Why not just stay armed all the time? And then he devised the national security state. You've got to go up and swear allegiance to the United States or else you're a commie. I mean, we had imported fascism. We get Dwight Eisenhower, who said that we have this great military industrial complex. It is a dangerous thing. And he said this is going to change everything. And the way our country's governed, it's going to change us politically. Along comes Jack Kennedy, who wanted to make his mark, believed in the Cold War. But he said in this kind of politics, it is the appearance of things that matters. I think everybody should take a sober look at the world about us. The national security state still exists, only it isn't communism anymore, it's terrorism. This is the most serious thing that has happened in the history of the United States. Knowledge is power. We need an honest news system.
We need the real news.
This is the sort of thing we can build right now without anyone else's permission from the government or from the business community. It's the power's in our hands.
If we're not going to sleepwalk into more wars, we think we need to start with a television news network that won't bow to pressure and has the courage to seek facts. And that means independent economics. And that's why we need you.
Make a tax-deductible donation now of at least $10 a month or a one-time give of at least $75. As a thank you for your support, we will send you the new documentary film, The History of the National Security State.